A howling wind scours the auction barn outside Santa Fe, where a battered German shepherd is dragged out, his eyes full of secrets, his ribs sharp under a matted coat. In a single, stubborn act, an old rancher named Eli Carter stakes his last $10 on a dog no one else wants. But this rescue is just the first step into a world of buried legends, midnight danger, and a family's fight for survival. What unfolds will break you open and put you back together, showing that the greatest treasures aren't silver or gold, but courage, loyalty, and second chances. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you joining us from today? Drop your city or country below, and if you believe even the most broken soul can heal, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to join our family of hope and true stories. They say the wind never really dies in the high country outside Santa Fe. On this day, it howled hard enough to scour the flesh right off a man's bones, rattling the battered tin roof of the livestock auction barn and sending yellow dust swirling through every crack. Horses shifted restlessly in their pens, cattle lowed, and even the auctioneer's voice seemed small against the gale. Underneath the wooden sign, worn by years and storms, folks crowded in flannel shirts and sweat-stained hats, eyes squinting as grit and hope mingled in the air. Eli Carter, standing near the edge of the chaos, pulled his battered denim jacket tighter and rubbed the calluses on his hands. He felt every mile of his years, every sleepless night since Maggie passed, and every anxious heartbeat for the boy waiting back home. The ranch was losing money, the fences were rotting, and the mortgage, looming like a vulture, never gave him a moment's rest. But today, of all days, he was here for something else. Not livestock, not hope exactly, something closer to desperation. He watched as horses were paraded out and bid on, most finding new owners, some to good hands, others, he suspected, to worse. Then came the last lot, a large, battered German shepherd, ribs showing through his matted coat, a pale scar tracing one ear, eyes sharp but wary. The tag on his collar read, "Scout," but the handler dragged him with a short, choked leash, as if he were nothing but trouble. "Last call! One more, folks!" the auctioneer shouted, his words tumbling over the wind. "What do I hear for this here shepherd? Used to belong to Old Man Parker, missing now, they say. Dog's got some fight, but he's seen better days." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "That mutt's more wolf than dog," someone jeered. Another called, "He'll eat your chickens, Eli. You need a friend, not a menace." Eli felt his cheeks burn, but he didn't back down. He watched the dog, Scout, lock eyes with him. Something ancient and wild flickered there. The auctioneer tried again. $10. Do I hear 10? Silence. Eli's voice, rough with dust and stubborn pride, broke through. 10. A pause, then snickers, even a few outright laughs. "You crazy, Carter?" someone muttered, but the auctioneer, sensing a sale, hammered the gavel. "Sold! $10 to the gentleman in the blue jacket." Scout resisted at first, muscles tensing as Eli reached for his collar. But Eli crouched down, speaking softly, hand steady even as his heart hammered in his chest. "It's just you and me now, buddy," he whispered. "Last chance for both of us." For a moment, time slowed. Eli's trembling hand closed over the scarred leather, and Scout, watchful, wounded, didn't pull away. Just the ghost of a shiver ran through the dog's frame, and then he leaned in, barely perceptible, as if accepting a silent pact. Around them, the crowd drifted away, the joke already old. Eli led Scout to his battered pickup, tying him carefully in the back. ignoring the looks and muttered comments from the departing ranchers. As he climbed behind the wheel, he could feel the weight of regret and possibility pressing in from every side. He had barely turned the key when a sharp gust slammed the driver's door shut. Over the rush of wind, he heard two men talking near the barn, voices low and urgent. "Did you hear? That's Parker's dog. Disappeared the night the old coot went missing." "You think there's truth to those stories? Outlaw treasure, silver coins, buried somewhere in the sage? Hell, I don't know. But some folks say that dog knows more than he lets on." Eli's grip tightened on the steering wheel. For a moment, his imagination wandered. Ancient coins, blood under moonlight, legends buried in the high desert. He shook his head. Foolishness. He had more immediate problems. A hungry son, a dying ranch, and now a broken dog who looked like he'd never known a kind hand. The drive home was rough. Scout shifted restlessly in the bed, eyes never leaving the horizon, body taut as a coiled spring. Every jolt sent him tensing, but he never barked or whined, just watched, always watching. Eli kept glancing in the rearview mirror, feeling the presence of the dog like a shadow at his back. Maybe it was crazy to bring another lost soul into the chaos of his life. But in that battered mirror, Eli saw something he hadn't recognized in himself for a long time. A flicker of fight, a stubbornness that refused to die. Maybe it was the same wild streak he saw in Scout. Maybe that was all a man really needed to keep moving forward. As dusk bled into night, Eli pulled into his yard, a patchwork of weeds, old machinery, and the lights of his small house glowing warm through the storm. His son, little Sam, ran out to greet him, eyes wide with excitement and worry. "Daddy, is that our new dog?" Sam called, voice thin against the wind. Eli nodded, lifting the tailgate. "Meet Scout. He's got some stories to tell, I bet." Scout stood frozen for a moment, sniffing the air, gauging the boy. Then, with cautious steps, he crossed the threshold into their lives, bringing with him the weight of secrets, scars, and maybe, just maybe, a chance for redemption. And as the first cold stars blinked overhead, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that something big was beginning. Something that reached far beyond lost dogs and empty pockets. In the silence that followed, a promise hung between man and animal, fragile but unbroken, as the wind carried old legends across the sage. The old ranch house creaked and groaned as the wind pressed against its battered frame, rattling the glass in the kitchen windows. Eli sat at the table, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee, eyes fixed on the dog sprawled on the braided rug. Scout's chest rose and fell, but he never quite relaxed, ears twitching at every unfamiliar creak, amber eyes darting from the door to the shadows dancing on the walls. Sam, still in his faded pajamas, crouched nearby with a piece of bacon held out in trembling fingers. "Come on, boy," he whispered, trying to coax Scout closer. The dog hesitated, then inched forward, taking the bacon so gently it barely brushed Sam's palm. For a moment, the boy's face lit up with pure delight, and even Eli felt hope stirred deep in his chest. That hope didn't last long. The restlessness started after breakfast. Scout paced from room to room, nails clicking on the scuffed wooden floor, tail low, nose pressed to the crack at the bottom of the door. When Eli tried to calm him, Scout whined, deep and urgent, eyes fixed on the horizon outside. It was like he sensed something just beyond their view, something that set every nerve on edge. They spent the afternoon fixing the south fence. Sam tagged along, toting a bucket of rusty nails, asking endless questions about dogs, outlaws, and buried treasure. Eli answered as best he could, trying to hide the worry gnawing at him. He'd heard the rumors all his life, ghost stories about gold and silver, about desperate men disappearing into the desert. Now those old tales felt closer than ever. Just before dusk, as the sun flared orange against the mesa, Scout's agitation peaked. He howled once, long and low, and raced along the fence line, hackles bristling. Eli froze, hammer in hand, watching the dog leap at the wire, nose to the ground, tracing a scent only he could sense. In the distance, a dark truck paused at the end of their driveway, its engine idling. Eli stared it down, feeling a chill settle in his bones, until the truck finally turned and sped off down the dusty road. That night, Eli locked every door and window. He tucked Sam in, promising everything was fine, then sat in the living room with the shotgun across his knees. Scout curled at his feet, but neither of them slept much. The wind had died, leaving a silence so thick Eli could hear his own heart pounding. The silence didn't last. Just past midnight, a sudden crash shattered the night. A window somewhere in the back of the house. Eli was on his feet in an instant, adrenaline surging as he snatched the shotgun and raced down the hall. Scout was already there, teeth bared, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Sam's voice trembled from his bedroom. "Daddy, what's happening?" "Stay put, buddy," Eli called, trying to sound braver than he felt. He found the broken window in the mudroom, glass scattered on the floor, curtains whipping in the cold breeze. Scout lunged forward, nose pressed to the ground, tracing something Eli couldn't see. Outside, the yard was empty, but the gate was hanging open, and the horses in the far pasture stamped and snorted in alarm. Eli stepped outside, shotgun raised, senses straining in the darkness. Nothing moved but the tumbleweeds. Then he saw them, strange footprints in the dirt, too big for Sam, too narrow for Eli. And right there on the porch, glinting in the faint moonlight, was a single silver coin, old and worn, stamped with a mark he didn't recognize. His skin prickled. Someone had been here, and they wanted him to know it. Back inside, Scout whined and pawed at the door, desperate to get out. Eli hesitated. He wanted nothing more than to keep Sam safe, to bolt every lock and hunker down until morning. But Scout's urgency was undeniable. Something out there was calling to the dog, something that had nothing to do with fences or burglars. Eli faced a brutal choice. He knelt beside Sam's bed, brushing the hair from his boy's forehead. "I need you to be brave for me, buddy," he whispered. "Lock the door and don't let anyone in but me or Scout, okay?" Sam nodded, eyes huge in the dim light. "Will you be okay, Daddy?" Eli forced a smile. "Scout and I can handle anything." Outside, the night was cold and sharp. Scout led the way, nose to the ground, moving with purpose. Eli followed, flashlight in one hand, shotgun in the other. The footprints led away from the house, past the broken fence, across the moonlit field, and into the wild sage beyond. Every step took them farther from safety, deeper into the wilderness where the land fell away in twisting arroyos and shadowed gullies. Scout moved faster, sometimes breaking into a run, his body tense with focus. Eli struggled to keep up, nerves fraying with every snapping twig and rustle of wind. After what felt like miles, Scout stopped dead, tail straight, hackles raised. He began digging furiously at the base of a gnarled juniper, claws ripping at the dry earth. Eli watched, breath held, as the dog unearthed a battered, rust-stained canteen, old, dented, the leather strap long rotted away. A faded initial was still visible, and a dark stain marked the side. Eli turned the canteen over in his hands, a chill running down his spine. The legend was real. Blood, silver, and secrets, right here in his hands. Scout whined softly, pressing close to Eli's side, his body trembling. Whatever ghosts haunted this land, they were awake now. And Eli realized, with a sick twist of fear and excitement, that his family was tangled in something far bigger than he'd ever imagined. He glanced back at the distant glow of his house, wondering if he'd ever see it the same way again. In that lonely wilderness, under a sky heavy with stars, Eli Carter made a silent vow. Whatever danger waited out there, whatever secrets Scout had brought into their lives, he would face them head on. Because sometimes, a man didn't get to choose his destiny. Sometimes, destiny came scratching at his door, eyes wild, coat scarred, carrying all the weight of forgotten legends. And sometimes, the only thing you could do was follow. The high desert at dawn was a world apart, washed in cold blue light, silent except for the scurry of some hidden coyote and the distant flap of a raven's wings. Eli Carter moved through this lonely wilderness, boots kicking up fine dust, shotgun heavy across his shoulder, the canteen from last night slapping against his thigh with every step. Scout trotted at his side, tail low, nose twitching, as if every breeze whispered a new secret. It had been a sleepless night. Eli couldn't shake the memory of those strange footprints, the shattered window, or the silver coin left on his porch like some kind of warning. He'd spent hours peering out the window, checking on Sam, watching Scout prowl the shadows of the yard. When the eastern sky finally lightened, it felt less like a new beginning and more like another round in a fight he didn't understand. Now, as the world awoke, Eli and Scout traced the broken fence line to where the tracks had vanished into the sage. The silence was deep, too deep. Not a single lark or jackrabbit broke the hush. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Eli's mind wandered as he walked. Every shadow beneath the mesquite looked like a crouching figure. Every rustle in the grass sent adrenaline surging through his veins. His thoughts circled back again and again to Maggie. Her easy laugh. The way she'd sing when she thought no one was listening. How she'd hold Sam close when thunder rolled across the valley. Grief and regret were old companions by now. He wondered if he'd ever live up to her memory, or if he was just drifting further away every day. Scout stopped suddenly, head cocked, ears pointed toward a tangle of rock and brush. The dog let out a single sharp bark and took off, disappearing over a small rise. Eli's heart thudded as he hurried after, lungs burning in the thin morning air. At the top of the arroyo, the world dropped away. A maze of red dirt gullies, twisted juniper, and shadows that pooled like spilled ink. Scout was already halfway down, weaving through the rocks with practiced ease. Eli followed, sliding on loose gravel, every step a test of trust, in the dog, in himself, in whatever force had thrown them together. Down in the canyon, the air was cooler, scented with sage and stone. Eli caught up to Scout in a shallow hollow where the earth had been disturbed. The dog circled a spot near an old cottonwood, pawing at the ground, tail wagging once before settling into a crouch. Eli crouched beside him, hands sifting through the loose earth. He found another clue. Half-buried wooden timbers, weathered and gray, marking the entrance to something long hidden. His heart skipped. Beside the timbers, pressed into the damp earth, was a single faded boot print. Someone had been here, and not long ago. He sat back on his heels, staring at the boot print, the canteen, the silver coin in his pocket. It was too much to be a coincidence. He thought about the stories his father used to tell by the fire. Legends of outlaws, lost mines, hidden fortunes waiting to be found by a man desperate or brave enough to try. Back then, Eli had laughed at those tales. Now, with Scout at his side and fear crawling up his spine, he wondered if every word had been true. Scout nosed at the timbers again, whining softly. The shaft beyond was little more than a crack in the earth, lined with rotting boards and half-choked with tumbleweeds. Eli shined his flashlight inside. The beam caught a scatter of rocks, the faint glint of something metallic, and a darkness so deep it felt alive. "Stay back, boy," Eli murmured, though Scout seemed unwilling to leave his side. He hesitated at the threshold, memories swirling, his father's steady hand on his shoulder, Maggie's voice telling him not to be reckless, Sam's laughter echoing through empty rooms. He took a breath and reached inside, brushing aside cobwebs and dust, hands trembling as he searched for something, anything, that might explain what was happening. He found nothing at first, just dirt and splinters and the dry smell of old earth. But then, hidden beneath a pile of stones, he uncovered a rusted tin box. Eli pried it open, heart pounding. Inside were scraps of paper, illegible with age, one old photograph of a man in a wide-brimmed hat, and a single silver coin matching the one from his porch. On the back of the photo, someone had scrawled a single word: redemption. The word lingered in Eli's mind, heavy with meaning. Redemption. Was that what he was chasing? Or was it just survival? A last-ditch attempt to prove he was more than the sum of his mistakes. He sat there for a long while, letting the canyon's silence settle around him. Scout pressed close, body warm against Eli's leg, as if to anchor him in the present. Night fell early in the arroyos, shadows lengthening until the world was nothing but moonlight and memory. Eli watched the stars come out, thinking of Maggie, of Sam asleep in his bed, of his father's tales and the possibility of redemption in a world that had always seemed to take more than it gave. He wondered if courage was just a matter of putting one foot in front of the other, even when you couldn't see the path ahead. Scout's steady gaze met Eli's. No judgment, no fear, just quiet loyalty, the kind that didn't need words. In that silent communion, something inside Eli began to heal. Tomorrow, he would go back. He would search the mine, follow the clues, do whatever it took to protect his son and maybe, just maybe, lay the past to rest. For now, under the starlit sky, Eli allowed himself a rare gift: hope. Eli Carter hadn't set foot in a mine since he was a boy, back when his father still believed the world was mapped out by a steady hand and not by luck or loss. Now, at the crumbling mouth of the shaft, he wiped the sweat from his brow and stared into the blackness as if it might spit out answers or ghosts. The morning light glimmered off a weathered sign, half buried in dust, warning of collapse. He weighed his options: turn back and live with the not knowing, or crawl forward, risking everything for a truth that might change nothing at all. Scout stood beside him, quiet and alert. The dog's presence was a lifeline, solid, steady, never flinching even as the earth seemed to swallow the daylight. Eli braced himself and crawled inside, the world shrinking to a narrow tunnel of dirt, timber, and hope. He could hear Scout's soft panting behind him, the shuffle of paws on old planks, and that simple grounding sound did more for his courage than any memory or prayer. The mine was colder than Eli expected, each breath fogged in the beam of his flashlight. He tried to focus on the practical, checking the timbers for rot, keeping low, moving slow. Still, old panic surged in his chest. The memory of being trapped once as a kid with only his father's voice and a sliver of sky to guide him out. He shook off the fear, forcing his attention forward. The walls gleamed here and there with veins of silver, raw, untouched, like the promise of wealth and trouble all at once. Eli reached out, running his fingers along the jagged stone. There was a beauty in it, wild and dangerous, a reminder that some things were worth the risk, even if they never paid off. Halfway down the shaft, Scout nudged Eli's back, whining low. Eli paused, shining his light to the side. There, wedged behind a fallen support beam, was a small cache, a leather pouch, a scatter of coins so old the faces had worn away, and a battered revolver with a cracked ivory handle. Eli's breath caught. He examined the coins, each stamped with the same curious mark as the ones he'd found on the porch and in the canyon. Legend made real. Proof of something hidden, something that could pull a desperate man out of the dust, or bury him even deeper. Scout's tail brushed Eli's arm, breaking the trance. The dog pressed forward, nose to the dirt, snuffling at boot prints so fresh they still held the memory of someone else's fear. Eli's heart pounded. Someone had been down here recently. He scanned the shadows, flashlight trembling as it caught on fresh tool marks gouged into the rock. He ducked low, moving farther into the shaft. The air grew heavy, thick with dust and old secrets. In a wide pocket at the tunnel's end, Eli found the remains of a campsite, a spent lantern, a coil of rope, a moldy blanket, and scattered food wrappers. Whoever camped here had been desperate, maybe running from the law, maybe running from the same ghosts that haunted Eli. Scout circled the small space, barking once at the darkness beyond a split in the rock wall. Eli followed, squeezing through the gap until the tunnel opened into a cavern lit only by the pale beam of his flashlight. He gasped. Embedded in the far wall was a vein of silver so bright it seemed to glow, untouched by time. Beneath it, a wooden crate covered in dust and a torn canvas sack bulging with outlaw coins. Eli's knees went weak. For a moment, all he could do was stare. Fortune, legend, and danger piled together at his feet. Scout nosed the crate, tail wagging just once before he turned to face the tunnel, hackles raised. Then Eli saw them. More boot prints, overlapping in the dirt. He knelt, examining the tread. Different sizes, different patterns. More than one person had been here, searching, maybe watching, maybe plotting. His mind raced through the possibilities. Had they found the same coins? Had they seen Eli's light flicker in the dark? He scooped up a handful of the coins, letting them clink together. The sound echoed down the shaft. Too loud, too much like a dare. Suddenly the mind felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves were listening. Scout whined again, pawing at Eli's arm. Eli looked down, meeting the dog's eyes. In that moment, something shifted inside him. A realization that loyalty, the kind that Scout showed with every breath, was a treasure no outlaw could steal. The dog's trust wasn't automatic. It was earned in moments like these, forged in darkness and shared danger. Eli knelt, pressing his forehead to Scout's for a brief, silent moment. "We're in this together, partner," he whispered, voice rough with gratitude and fear. He forced himself to move, packing a few coins and the revolver into his backpack. The rest he left hidden, a secret for another day, if there was another day. He backed out of the cavern, Scout close behind, nerves jangling with every creak and groan of the old timbers. Near the entrance, Eli paused, listening for any sign of pursuit. Nothing but the soft rush of wind and the dog's steady breathing. He crawled out into the light, blinking at the sudden glare, heart thundering in his chest. Outside, the world felt different, brighter, sharper, more dangerous. Eli looked back at the dark mouth of the mine, then down at Scout. He knew, deep in his bones, that someone else was searching for the treasure. Someone ruthless enough to kill for it. He took one last look at the shaft before leading Scout back toward home, mind racing with plans, fears, and the glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could outwit the darkness chasing them. As the sun climbed higher, Eli realized something that would guide him through every trial ahead. Trust, like silver, was precious because it survived the fire. By late afternoon, the sky had turned heavy, thick with the promise of a summer storm. Eli and Scout hurried down from the old mine shaft, battered backpacks heavy with secrets and dust. Sagebrush whipped at their legs as thunder grumbled somewhere far off. The wind had shifted, an uneasy, restless current that made even Scout pause, nose high, hackles bristling. Eli's mind raced the whole way back, heart pounding with every step. The outlaw coins clinked in his pack, each one a tiny echo of trouble. He tried to piece together the puzzle: fresh boot prints, the campsite in the mine, and the warning left on his porch. All signs pointed to danger that was growing bolder and closer. The ranch looked deceptively peaceful when he arrived, the fields glowing gold in the dying light, the outline of his house soft against the coming storm. But something was wrong. Even before he reached the porch, Eli saw the signs. The side gate hung open, a window pane in the barn was cracked, and one of Sam's small boots was lying in the dirt, toes pointing toward the house. Scout went rigid, ears flat, and then bolted ahead, barking sharply. Eli sprinted after him, shotgun ready. The front door was ajar, its hinges creaking in the wind. His stomach dropped as he crossed the threshold. The house was chaos. Chairs overturned, drawers ripped open, muddy footprints tracked through the hallway. The sharp scent of fear and sweat hung in the air. "Sam!" Eli's voice rang out, hoarse with terror. No answer, only silence and the distant rumble of thunder. He dashed from room to room. The kitchen window had been shattered, glass sparkling on the linoleum. Scout nosed through the debris, whining urgently. On the refrigerator, pinned by a rusted nail, was a scrap of notebook paper scrawled with shaky handwriting. "You want the boy? Bring what's ours. Mesa's Edge. Midnight." Eli's breath left him in a shudder. For a moment he felt paralyzed, staring at the words as if they might change. But Scout's bark jolted him back to himself. Urgent, desperate, focused. The dog ran in tight circles, nose pressed to the floor, and then shot down the hall, out the back door, into the gathering dusk. Eli followed, legs trembling. Scout led him through the yard, across the pasture, and up the dry creek bed toward the mesa, nose always to the ground, tail streaming behind like a banner. The light faded quickly, the world shrinking to the small circle of Eli's flashlight and the thudding fear in his chest. Every step was agony. Guilt clawed at Eli's insides. He'd left Sam to chase ghosts and silver, and now his son was paying the price. All the old failures crashed back. Maggie's death, the money troubles, the nights he'd promised Sam things would get better. Now, with every mile, that promise felt emptier. Scout barked, sharp and certain. Eli stumbled over a twisted root, scraping his shin, but pressed on. The mesa loomed above, black and jagged against the bruised sky. Lightning flashed on the horizon, casting wild shadows across the rocks. Somewhere up there, his boy was waiting, or worse. They reached the base of the mesa, where the ground dropped away into a tangled ravine. The wind howled, carrying voices, taunting, mocking from the top. Eli crouched, heart hammering, peering through the darkness. Scout growled low, muscles bunched, ready to spring. Eli crept forward, belly flat against the earth, trying to make out shapes in the gloom. Then he saw them, 3 men, hulking silhouettes against the rocks. One had Sam by the collar, the boy's face pale and terrified in the lightning's glare. Rage and terror crashed over Eli. He leveled the shotgun, hands steady despite the shaking in his heart. "Let him go," he shouted, voice raw, laughter echoed down. The biggest man, Hank Dobbs, Eli recognized him now, a local troublemaker with a mean streak a mile wide, shoved Sam forward, dangling him just out of reach. "You want the kid? Bring the coins, all of them. No games, Carter." Eli took a step forward, desperation burning in his eyes. "He's just a child, Hank. Leave him out of this." Dobbs sneered. "This ain't about the kid. It's about what's owed. Bring the bag or you won't see him again." The world shrank to that moment. Lightning, rain beginning to spit from the sky, Scout trembling with fury at Eli's side. Eli unzipped his pack, the outlaw coins flashing in the stormlight. "Let him go first." A tense silence, broken only by thunder. Dobbs motioned to his men, but Scout leapt forward, teeth bared, a blur of muscle and will. Chaos exploded. Men shouting, Sam scrambling away, Scout lunging for Dobbs. Eli fired into the air, a warning. The bandits scattered, but Dobbs grabbed the bag of coins and shoved Sam hard to the ground. Scout went after Dobbs, snarling, driving the man back. Sam crawled to Eli, clutching his father's waist, sobbing. Eli shielded him, turning the shotgun on the gang as the storm broke full force, rain pouring down in sheets. Dobbs, bleeding from a gash on his arm where Scout had caught him, glared back. "This ain't over, Carter," he spat, then vanished into the blackness, clutching the coins. For a long moment, the only sound was rain drumming on rock and the boy's broken sobs. Eli dropped to his knees, holding Sam close, Scout pressing against them both. He whispered promises, never again, into Sam's hair. The coins were gone. The danger wasn't. But Eli had his son, and the bond between father, boy, and dog had been hammered into something unbreakable by fear or storm. Thunder rolled across the mesa as they limped home, soaked, battered, but together. Above them, the desert sky split wide open, as if the land itself mourned and raged for what had almost been lost. The storm hammered the desert through most of the night, wind howling and rain lashing the battered roof of Eli's ranch house. He barely slept. Every crack of thunder sounded like a door slamming. Every flash of lightning threw wild shadows across the room where Sam huddled close. Scout patrolled the hallway, never straying far from father and son, muscles taut and senses straining. At dawn, the storm broke, leaving the air scrubbed clean and sharp, the world washed in a harsh, silver light. Eli rose from his chair, back aching, eyes burning with fatigue and worry. Sam stirred beneath the quilt, face streaked with dried tears, clutching a worn, stuffed bear that had survived more storms than any of them. Scout sat at the boy's feet, unwavering, a silent promise that no harm would come while he was near. Eli brewed coffee and tried to make sense of the chaos. The coins were gone, stolen by Hank Dobbs and his gang, but Eli's gut told him that was only the start. Dobbs had a claim to the mine, maybe even an old deed, a map, something that made him think the silver rightfully belonged to him. But Dobbs wasn't the type to settle things in court. He'd be back, and this time, he might not leave anyone breathing. As the morning brightened, a battered sheriff's cruiser crunched up the drive. Sheriff Nathan Booker, an old friend of Eli's late father, and a man who'd spent his whole life keeping peace where law ran thin, stepped out, raincoat flapping. He listened in grim silence as Eli recounted the break-in, the ransom, the ambush at the Mesa. Booker knelt to examine the boot prints still muddy in the yard and turned the silver coin over in his palm. "Dobbs has gone too far this time," Booker said, jaw clenched. "But he's clever. He won't hide long. You say he took the coins?" Eli nodded. "He'll be heading for the mine. He thinks there's more down there. I found tool marks, fresh ones, and he's not working alone." Booker wiped his brow. "You boys stay put. I'll gather a posse. Don't let Sam out of your sight." But Eli couldn't sit still. He checked his shotgun, packed what supplies he could, and left Sam in the care of Miss Pearl, the tough-as-nails neighbor who'd watched the boy a dozen times before. Sam clung to his father's sleeve, fear shining in his eyes. "You'll come back, Daddy. You promise?" Eli hugged him tight, voice raw. "Nothing on this earth could keep me from you, kiddo." Scout leapt into the truck, eyes blazing with determination. Eli patted his flank. "Let's finish this." The drive out to the mine was tense. Every mile a memory of loss, every twist in the road a possible ambush. The desert was washed clean by rain, the sage a living ocean, sky towering above. Eli parked behind a stand of scrub oak and approached on foot, keeping low, Scout silent at his side. The mine entrance yawned in the hillside, dark and unwelcoming. A set of fresh tire tracks led to the mouth, and the faint echo of voices drifted up the shaft. Dobbs and his men searching for treasure they didn't understand. Booker and his two deputies, rifles ready, fanned out behind Eli. "We don't have much time," Booker whispered. "We flush them out or catch them coming up." Lightning flickered far off, thunder rolling closer. The storm wasn't done yet. Eli moved with Scout through the brush, circling to the back of the mine, where an old air vent had collapsed, leaving a crawl space just big enough for a determined man or a dog. Eli squeezed through, belly scraping rock, Scout wriggling ahead. They emerged in a side tunnel lit by the flicker of lanterns. Voices bounced off the stone, Dobbs cursing, someone else laughing, the metallic clang of shovels on rock. Eli motioned to Scout. The dog crept forward, senses razor sharp. A shadow moved. Dobbs, pistol in hand, back turned. Scout lunged, jaws clamping on the outlaw's wrist, knocking the weapon aside. Dobbs roared in pain, swinging wildly. Eli tackled him, sending them both crashing into the dirt. Chaos erupted, men shouting, gunfire echoing in the shaft. Booker's deputies stormed in from the front, pinning Dobbs's gang against the far wall. Scout fought like fury, driving back a second attacker who tried to club Eli from behind. In the mayhem, Eli wrenched the stolen coins from Dobbs's grip, slamming the outlaw to the ground. "Enough!" Booker's voice rang out. The gunfire stopped. Dobbs lay bleeding, wrists bound, eyes full of venom. The rest of the gang were rounded up, battered and bruised, cursing Eli and the sheriff. Sam's terrified face flashed through Eli's mind. He staggered out into the open air, knees weak, rain beginning to fall again. Scout licked his hand. Blood streaked through the fur on his muzzle, a silent badge of courage. Booker clapped Eli on the shoulder. "You did good, son. Real good." Eli didn't feel like a hero. He knelt in the mud, pulling Scout close, letting relief wash over him like rain. Sam was safe. The coins were recovered. The mine, whatever secrets it held, was no longer just a legend. It was proof that even the deepest wounds could heal, given enough courage and the loyalty of a good dog. Dobbs, dragged off by the deputies, shouted one last threat, voice ragged. "You ain't seen the last of me, Carter. This land was never yours." Eli met his eyes, unflinching. "It's not about land, Dobbs. It's about doing what's right." As the storm finally rolled away, Eli and Scout stood together in the gray dawn, battered but unbroken. In that moment, silver was just a metal, the mine just a hole in the earth. What mattered was the family waiting for him and the dog who had risked everything to bring them back together. The desert dawn had barely broken before the next wave of trouble swept over the Carter Ranch. Lightning danced on the horizon, painting the sky a bruise purple, while the air throbbed with the heaviness that comes just before a storm breaks for good. Eli hadn't slept. Neither had Scout. Both sat tense on the porch, weapons close by as the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the last, violent act. Word had spread fast. News of the mine, the coins, the brawl at the shaft. Neighbors whispered, and every set of headlights along the county road brought fresh worry. Sheriff Booker was back before sunrise, hat pulled low, pistol holstered but ready, 2 deputies close behind. The men braced for what they knew was coming. Sam clung to Scout in the dim light of the parlor, small hands buried deep in the dog's thick fur. "Will they come back, Daddy?" The boy's voice was a ghost in the stillness. Eli knelt, squeezing his son's shoulders. "We're ready for them this time. No one's going to hurt you." He kissed Sam's forehead, forced a smile, then rose to stand with Booker at the window. Scout followed, every muscle taut, nose twitching as he watched the shadows lengthen outside. It wasn't long before Dobbs returned. He'd always been too proud to slink away. This time he brought backup. 3 trucks rolled down the dusty drive, engines rumbling, carrying rough men with hard eyes and nothing left to lose. Eli's jaw tightened. The game was up. No more running, no more hiding. Booker barked orders. "Take cover! They want the mine! They'll have to come through us!" The deputies moved to defensive positions, rifles ready behind overturned tables and at the narrow windows. Eli loaded his shotgun, eyes scanning the horizon for the first sign of movement. The first shot cracked the air, loud, shocking, sending Sam into Scout's side. Scout didn't flinch. Instead, he rose and stood between Sam and the window, teeth bared, tail rigid. A man called out from the trucks, voice mocking, "Come out, Carter. You got something that ain't yours." Rain began to fall, hissing on the dry earth, as thunder growled above. The standoff had begun. Dobbs's men spread out, using the storm as cover. Lightning split the sky, illuminating their shadows as they crept toward the mine's entrance, rifles glinting. Booker returned fire, careful and controlled, bullets sparking off stone. "Stay low," he called. "Don't waste a shot." Eli crouched behind a stack of hay bales, eyes darting between the house and the mine. He realized suddenly that Dobbs wasn't aiming to hurt, at least not yet. He wanted to force a surrender, flush Eli out, claim the silver and the legend for himself. But Eli had other plans. Scout whined, pawing at the door, ears flicking toward the back of the house. Eli looked down and understood. The old arroyo, the path behind the barn, might let Scout circle around the attackers. He opened the back door just enough for the dog to slip out. "Go, boy," he whispered. "Watch our backs." Scout disappeared into the rain, a silent shadow. Eli's heart hammered, fear gnawing at him. He trusted Scout's instincts more than any man's rifle. As the storm raged, Dobbs led his men toward the mine, ducking low behind scattered rocks. Scout, moving through the brush with all the skill of a born tracker, circled wide. He watched, waited, and when Dobbs gave the signal to rush the entrance, Scout struck. It happened in seconds. A blur of fur and fury as Scout leapt from the rocks, barking and snarling. Men shouted, scrambled back, one firing wildly into the air. The confusion was all Eli needed. He and Booker dashed from cover, cutting off Dobbs's retreat. Bullets flew, slamming into rock, kicking up sprays of dust and splinters. Scout darted through the chaos, nipping at heels, herding Dobbs's men like lost cattle. One tried to grab him, but Scout twisted away, leading the attackers straight into a gully that Eli and Booker had prepared earlier that morning. As the outlaws stumbled in, Eli triggered the trap, a rock slide set with old fence posts and a rope. Boulders tumbled down, blocking the escape and pinning Dobbs's crew in place. Rain soaked everyone, mud caking boots, as the lawmen surrounded the trapped men. Dobbs stood at the head of his gang, eyes wild, hair plastered to his face. "This ain't over," he screamed, struggling against Booker's grip as the sheriff slapped cuffs on his wrists. Eli glanced over at Scout, who panted heavily, but wagged his tail in triumph, fur streaked with mud, eyes bright and proud. In the distance, Sam peeked out the window, relief spreading across his face as the danger faded. But it wasn't quite finished. As Booker's men rounded up Dobbs and the others, Eli's flashlight caught a glint inside the mine, a hidden crevice recently disturbed. Curiosity, mingled with dread, drove him forward. He squeezed into the narrow opening and found an old, dust-choked chamber, its walls lined with journals, letters, and heirlooms left behind by the very outlaw whose legend had started all this trouble. Eli pulled out a faded journal, flipping through entries that spoke of hardship, of family lost and found, of love and regret. The outlaw, it turned out, had never intended to curse the land with violence. He'd tried to leave a legacy for those who came after, a chance at a better life. Lightning flashed one last time as Eli emerged from the shaft, Scout close behind, clutching the journal. The storm, both outside and in, was finally breaking. Booker met him at the entrance. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Eli nodded, eyes full of something softer than triumph. "Maybe I found what I needed." And as the sun pushed through the clouds, painting the sage in gold and green, Eli knew that the true treasure wasn't silver at all. It was loyalty, courage, and the bonds that held a family together, no matter how rough the storm. Sunrise in the high desert came quietly after the storm, gold spilling over the mesas and lighting every puddle, every blade of wet sage. The world felt new, washed and raw, yet the scars of what had happened lingered everywhere Eli looked. Dobbs and his gang were gone, hauled away in Booker's cruiser, but echoes of their voices, their threats, their greed seemed to cling to the old ranch like the smell of gunpowder. Eli stood on the porch, Scout at his feet, watching the sun chase the last shadows from the land. The house was battered but still standing, the yard torn up but empty of intruders. For the first time in weeks, a fragile peace settled in his chest. The mine was now his, legally and publicly. Booker's deputies had found old deeds tucked in the outlaw's journals, and lawyers from Santa Fe confirmed what Eli's father must have suspected for years. The land and everything below it belonged to the Carter family. The silver that ran beneath the sage was no longer just a legend, but a fact, one that drew attention Eli had never wanted. It started with neighbors, some wary, some envious, some simply amazed that quiet, unlucky Eli Carter had come into something that might change the valley forever. There were handshakes and suspicious glances, questions about the mine, about what Eli planned to do with all that wealth. Then the media arrived. A news van from Albuquerque, a local paper, even a pair of podcasters eager for a Wild West story with a modern twist. Microphones and cameras pointed at Eli's porch, their lights harsh, their questions relentless. "What will you do with the mine, Mr. Carter? Did you really find outlaw treasure? How does it feel to go from struggling rancher to the richest man in the valley?" Eli answered as best he could, sometimes stumbling, sometimes finding his voice. "I'm not interested in getting rich," he told them. "I just want to do right by my family, my neighbors, and the land. I want to build something that lasts." The reporters scribbled it down, though he saw more hunger in their eyes for drama than for truth. Through it all, Scout remained at his side, a silent anchor, unfazed by the whirlwind. When the cameras got too close, Scout stepped between Eli and the crowd, tail raised, eyes calm but unmistakably protective. It became a local joke. "You want to talk to Eli, you'd better befriend that old shepherd first." Sam, meanwhile, basked in the newfound attention, but felt the strain in his father's shoulders, the way Eli never seemed to relax. The boy drew pictures of mines and horses and dogs, showing them to Scout at night, whispering about outlaws and hidden treasure. Eli watched them, reminded every day that what truly mattered couldn't be bought or measured in ounces of silver. But change wasn't all easy. The mine brought trouble. Lawyers with contracts, strangers with schemes, old friends wanting a slice, neighbors suspicious of sudden fortune. Eli spent hours in meetings, filling out forms, struggling to keep the wolves from the door in a different way than before. Wealth, he quickly learned, was its own kind of storm. Through the confusion, Eli found himself drawn back to the journals, those letters from the outlaw who had hidden silver for his family, then died alone. He read them late at night by the fire, Scout at his feet, Sam sleeping upstairs. In those pages, Eli found not just a story of greed or violence, but of generosity. There were records of coins left on doorsteps for struggling settlers, supplies gifted to families too proud to ask for help, even letters to a lost child, written by a man who'd tried, in his own broken way, to make things right. The revelations shook Eli's understanding of justice, legacy, and what it meant to truly belong to a place. Maybe legends were more complicated than good guys and bad. Maybe, he thought, the best thing to do with a buried fortune wasn't to hoard it, but to put it to work for others. One evening, after the last reporter had packed up and the house was finally quiet, Eli called a meeting at the old church in the heart of the valley. Neighbors, ranchers, and shopkeepers filled the pews, curious and cautious. Eli stood up front, hands rough and honest, voice steady. "This land's given my family more than we ever expected. But I know what it's like to lose, to need help, to feel alone. So here's my promise. The mine's not just for us. I'll use what it gives to help the valley. Fix fences, build a new schoolhouse, start a rescue for working dogs like Scout. No more secrets, no more hiding." The room was silent at first. Then a slow, steady applause rose. Some neighbors nodding, a few with tears in their eyes. Even the old men who'd mocked Eli at the auction looked away, ashamed, maybe even a little grateful. Scout waited for him outside the church, tail thumping as Eli knelt and hugged him close. The future was uncertain. There would be more challenges, more storms, more people trying to take what wasn't theirs. But for the first time in a long while, Eli didn't feel alone. He had Scout. He had Sam. He had a community. Flawed, stubborn, but real. And as the sun dipped low over the sage, Eli whispered thanks to the memory of Maggie, to the old outlaw whose story had finally been told, and to the dog who had led him, again and again, back home. The days grew longer, the air warmer, as spring eased into the high desert. Eli Carter's world seemed to both expand and quiet down. After the frenzy of the mine, the news vans, and the chaos of Dobbs's attack, a hush settled over the ranch, a hush that carried weight, not just relief. For the first time in years, Eli found himself with space to think, to breathe, and to look at his life with eyes unclouded by desperation. He spent long afternoons mending fences with Sam, teaching him how to set posts straight and tie proper knots, while Scout dozed in the shade of the old cottonwood, eyes half closed but never fully asleep. The mines, the money, and all the outside attention receded to the background. What mattered most now was here and now, his son, his dog, his home, and the land that had given him a second chance. But it was impossible to ignore what had happened, or what it meant. Some wounds, Eli knew, didn't heal just because the shooting stopped or the papers were signed. Wealth hadn't fixed the ache in his chest from losing Maggie, nor had it erased the memories of all the years spent scraping by, doubting his worth, feeling like a failure as a husband and a father. Even now, with the future wide open, Eli found himself staring into the fire at night, questioning if he deserved any of it. Scout would always seem to know when the shadows crept in. On those nights, the dog lay at Eli's feet, a living weight of loyalty and comfort. Sometimes, Sam would wander downstairs, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and settle into his father's lap. Those moments, quiet and unremarkable, felt more valuable than all the silver hidden beneath the sage. Eli took to walking the old trails at dusk, Scout by his side, the sun dipping low behind the mesas. The peace of those walks invited reflection. He thought about his father, about the old stories of rugged individualism, men who tamed the land with nothing but grit, who refused help, who believed asking for kindness was weakness. Yet Eli saw now that the strongest people he'd ever known were those who gave help as freely as they accepted it. Scout had trusted him, despite his scars. Sam had looked up to him, even at his lowest. His neighbors, despite their pride and suspicion, had banded together in the end. The mine had become something different than he'd expected. He'd taken the advice in the outlaw's journals and started a rescue for working dogs, giving animals like Scout a home and a second chance. He'd funded repairs to the church roof and provided scholarships for local kids. Each check he signed felt less like charity and more like repayment for all the unseen debts he owed. To the land, to his community, to those who'd come before. One evening, as dusk painted the valley in lavender and gold, Eli watched as Sam hugged Scout tightly on the porch. "You saved us," the boy whispered, burying his face in the dog's neck. Scout, scarred but whole, closed his eyes, tail thumping in the dust. Eli felt tears prick his own eyes, not of grief this time, but of gratitude. Later that night, Eli pored over the old journals one last time. In the final pages, the outlaw had written about regret, about the pain of choices made in anger or fear, about losing family and longing for forgiveness. The man had left silver for others not out of pride, but out of hope that something good might grow where so much pain had been buried. It struck Eli then. The American dream was never about how much a man could take, but about what he could give back. That was what made a legacy last. Not gold, not land, but courage and generosity. The wounds he carried, the grief that had nearly broken him, had become the roots of something stronger. Scout's companionship, Sam's love, and the kindness of his neighbors had rebuilt his trust in himself and in the world. One afternoon, a local teacher visited the ranch with a box of letters from school children who'd heard about the mine and the dog rescue. Eli read them aloud at the dinner table. Notes about hope, about dreams for a better valley, about what it meant to have a hero who didn't wear a badge or carry a gun, but simply kept going even when the world seemed against him. That night, under a sky thick with stars, Eli sat by the fire, Sam curled against his side, Scout snoring at their feet. He realized that what was buried, pain, hope, or silver, only mattered if it was shared. That healing wasn't a gift you gave yourself, but something you found together. One day and one act of kindness at a time. Eli pressed a gentle kiss to Sam's head and scratched Scout behind the ears. "We made it," he said softly. "Not just through the storms, but through everything that tried to tear us apart." The wind outside carried the faintest echo of old legends, but inside the house was filled with warmth and laughter, a family remade by trial, forgiveness, and the quiet courage to keep moving forward. And as the firelight danced over the journals and the old outlaw coins on the mantel, Eli Carter finally let go of the past and looked toward a future that was brighter than he'd ever dared to imagine. Years slipped by in the valley, marked by the steady rhythm of sunrise and sunset, the turning of seasons, and the quiet miracles that came from hard work and second chances. The legend of the Carter Mine and the outlaws' lost silver faded into local folklore, but its true legacy lived on in the laughter echoing across the ranch and the lines of contentment that deepened on Eli Carter's weathered face. Eli grew older, his hands rough and strong, his hair streaked with silver that matched the metal still buried under the sage. He never moved away or built a mansion. He poured his heart into the land and the people around him. The mine became a community trust, a place where local kids learned about the history of their valley, where schools took field trips, and where no one chased dreams of quick riches anymore. Instead, they came for stories, for learning, and sometimes just to see Scout, the old shepherd with the proud eyes and the limp in his step. Scout aged with grace and dignity, his once scarred body softened by years of care and affection. He still made his rounds each morning, checking the barn, greeting the ranch hands, watching over Sam, now tall and strong, a young man with the same stubborn jaw as his father. Sam spent hours teaching younger children how to care for animals at the working dog rescue Eli had founded, passing on the lessons of trust, responsibility, and kindness that Scout had taught them all. Eli often found himself standing at the fence in the cool dusk, watching the land bathed in golden light. He thought of Maggie, her laughter, her faith in him, and felt peace instead of pain. Sometimes he would walk out to the mine's entrance where wildflowers grew among the stones. There, he'd sit quietly with Scout, remembering everything they'd survived and built together. On those evenings, the valley was alive with possibility. The old wounds, grief, fear, the weight of legend, had faded. In their place was a new kind of wealth, the trust of neighbors, the joy of shared labor, the simple fact of belonging. The pain had not vanished. It had transformed into wisdom, the kind that only comes from loss, forgiveness, and perseverance. Eli's relationship with the land deepened. He saw himself as a caretaker, not an owner. He invested in new irrigation, opened his pastures for community gatherings, and never turned away anyone who needed help. When a wildfire threatened the valley one summer, Eli and Sam rode side by side with their neighbors, digging trenches, hauling water, saving homes that weren't their own. The fire passed, leaving blackened earth and new shoots of green, another lesson in resilience. The dog rescue grew, becoming a sanctuary for animals with hard pasts and gentle souls. Scout, though no longer the fastest or strongest, became the wise old guardian, greeting each newcomer with patience. When he could no longer run the fields, Scout took up his spot beside the porch, content to watch the world from Eli's feet, ears twitching at the laughter of children and the calls of hawks circling overhead. Sam, inspired by his father and by Scout, took on more responsibility. He taught other kids to train and care for the dogs, telling them stories of courage and second chances, of storms survived and enemies forgiven. The rescue became more than a shelter. It was a place where lost things could be found, where broken spirits could mend. Eli never forgot the lessons of the past. He taught Sam, and anyone who would listen, that true wealth isn't measured by what you own, but by what you give away. He spoke at town meetings, wrote letters to lawmakers, and helped neighbors in ways big and small. The legend of the silver mine was no longer about outlaw treasure. It was about the strength of a community, the healing that comes from kindness, and the power of hope. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, Eli sat with Scout on the porch. The dog's muzzle was grayer now, his eyes clouded with age, but his loyalty had never faltered. Sam joined them, stretching out his long legs, looking out over the fields that were finally safe and green. "You ever miss the old days?" Sam asked, voice gentle. Eli smiled, reaching down to stroke Scout's head. "I miss some of the people, some of the dreams, but not the fear, not the loneliness. Life's richer now, even if it's quieter. We built something that lasts, not just for us, but for everyone." Sam nodded, leaning against his father's shoulder. The wind carried the scent of sage and summer rain, the sound of distant laughter and barking dogs. The pain of the past, the wounds, the loss, the struggle, had been woven into the fabric of their lives, but it was not the whole story. As darkness fell, Eli felt gratitude so deep it brought tears to his eyes. He whispered a silent thanks to Maggie, to Scout, to the outlaw who'd left hope hidden in the earth, and to the land itself, generous and forgiving. The last light touched the hills. Eli closed his eyes and listened to the world he'd helped heal. The ranch was filled with laughter, a place where legends were laid to rest, and new stories took root every day. The real treasure, Eli knew, was not silver or land, but the courage to keep going, the love that held a family together, and the willingness to risk everything for others. Wounds healed, not by time alone, but by faith, forgiveness, and shared hope. As the stars came out, Eli and Scout watched together, old friends forever changed, knowing that what they'd built would last long after the sun set over the sage.